yours truly. As you're logging in, if you'd be kind enough to say where you're logging in from, hit the like button and feel free to continue doing so throughout the dialogue. If you're catching the simulcast over on the YouTube, please be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. But of course, the best thing you can do is to share this video and spread the word about the Jeet Kune dialogues. Okay, so I wanted to finish up the year, so to speak, with an opportunity for you guys to get anything that you have off your chest, so to speak, before we go into the new year. And so I did get some questions in. In fact, Jerry Winterfeld just sent me some really interesting ones. But if you guys no, I didn't see anything in the comments on the postcard. But if you want to put something into the comments right now, I can switch my view over and take a look. So let me see who's here. Jerry Winterfeld. I think Jerry just beat Terry Valor. So Jerry's here, Terry's here, Mark David Collins, Simon Alpin, and Michael Perez, and Mark Black. All right, okay, so the UK is in the house, winning out over the UK and Europe, I should say, right? Winning out over the US kids. So if anybody's got a last minute question or what have you, feel free to put that into the comments, and I'll just try to keep scrolling on that and keep up with what you guys are saying. So, but while you think about that and get your questions together, I wanted to talk to you about something. I'm pretty sure all you guys know Paul Bax. I didn't know. I think I knew. No, I'm not even sure. But Paul Bax is famous in the JKD world. He's done a bunch of books, a series I think called Descendants of the Dragon. I have a couple of those books. I think I have Jesse Glover, and I'm not sure what the other one is. Paul's written articles for the different martial arts magazines, but I think most famously it was the Paul Bax Forum. I think that existed on whenever it was that forums were a thing, way back in the day. And that I don't know him from then. I know him probably just in the past 5 years since I started doing the podcast. But Paul, yesterday, I think it was, or at least I saw it yesterday, he put up a snapshot, a screenshot of a Bruce Lee letter to Taki Kimura, talking about Jun Fan being, I'm paraphrasing here, being light years ahead of Wing Chun. And he tagged me on it. And his thing was, I wonder where this is going to lead people or what have you. So my reply was that it doesn't lead me anywhere. If Bruce Lee wrote a letter in 1965, 66, 67 to Taki Kimura about Jun Fan being a step beyond Wing Chun, cool. That's just something that Bruce Lee wrote. Doesn't lead me anywhere, doesn't do anything for me, doesn't do anything to me or what have you. But what I wanted to call your attention to was a comment from my good buddy, Alex Richter, the Kung Fu genius. And Alex's comment was, this is going to end up being another one of those concepts versus original arguments. And in conversation with him earlier today, he said, in that comment, when he said it was going to end up being one of those circular arguments, he goes, you could just take Jeet Kune Do out and insert Wing Chun and you'd have the same arguments, right? In other words, there's people ignore the input from the other side, as Alex said. They assume that their opinion is the only valid one, right? On a topic as subjective as personal martial arts preferences, right? So it was a very interesting comment. If you guys want to go to Paul Bax's page and take a look, it's a screenshot of the Kimura letter and read Alex's comment. I just thought it was to use a word that I use a couple of times on Wednesday. It underscored um, Wednesday's I Love Jeet Kune broadcast, in which at the end I kind of asked people to make a resolution to be nothing but educative and informative in 2024 here on YouTube and Facebook on these Jeet Kune channels or Jeet Kune pages. Some of you are aware that the argument started 30 years ago. All of you are aware that Bruce Lee died 50 years ago. So my question to you is, why continue a debate which is never going to end? I think there's a lot of evidence that it's never going to end, because we'll always have differences of opinion. And who cares? Opinions are like, you know what, because everybody has one. So none of that matters, right? So it's high time that many more of you learn to ignore stuff that's put out there. Because I've said this to you before, because somebody puts up a post or somebody makes a comment, you don't have to react to it. None of us are paid to be the Jeet Kune police. Okay, right? Now, you know me, I make an exception if somebody says something demeaning about Dan Inosanto. That's my exception. If that's your exception too, more power to you. But you know, if it's something about, oh look, Bruce Lee is saying such and such to Taki Kimura, you don't need to reply to that. I replied because Paul tagged me on it, right? So if I get invited to participate, I might participate. But so what? It's a letter written in the 1960s. That doesn't have to end up in an argument about who knows and who doesn't know and who's full of crap and who's not full of crap. That's what I'm saying. That's not educative. It's not informative. It's unnecessary, totally unnecessary. So I'm hoping in the new year to see a lot more responsible behavior from you guys out there in the online Jeet Kune world. Okay. All right. So after that spiel, let me see what stuff has come in. Please explain to the Simon. Please. So I think I can put this up here. Simon Alpin says, please explain to the people for the last time. I doubt, Simon, that any explanation will be for the last time, right? JKD from the 1970s is not outdated. I don't know where they get that idea from, to be honest with you, Simon. I think this is an example of presentism. It's like, well, the stuff that we're doing 50 years later must be more effective than the stuff that they were doing 50 years ago. It's kind of like, we know that, let's take automobiles, right? A Tesla of 2023 is definitely a more powerful car, a more technologically advanced car than a Ford from 1970. Oh, for sure. Okay. All right. But essentially, they still do the same thing. You got four tires, you got a body, you got an engine of some sort, right? And you have a propulsion system, right? You have a braking system, and the functionality. So no matter what the technology is, we're still going to be trying to achieve the same things. We're going to be trying to be powerful, fast, understand distance, understand timing, understand rhythm, those types of things. And in that way, it's not outdated because that's what the game always is. Now, if you're talking about techniques, so to speak, right? Then the thing about outdated, here's where I think something might be outdated. Let's take a popular topic, right? The trap in hands stuff. I don't know how many of you, and you guys feel free to chime in on this in the comments. One of my realizations when it came to the trapping or what have you, when you do combination trapping, that was never, even though I didn't understand this in the beginning, right? I got to understand it a little bit later. That was never supposed to be, here's how it will happen in a real fight. You see? Okay. So the fancy trapping combinations that go, let's say, go past one or two movements into 3 or 4 movements or what have you. That is just a way to, it's you put stuff together so that, what's a good way? So instead of 1-step sparring, you do 3-step sparring, right? So that's kind of that. So you put stuff together so that people get to practice all the different parts of it. But it is one part or maybe 2 parts of it. That's the real technique. The techniques are just strung together in a sequence to give people more opportunity to practice stuff, right? It's kind of like, let's say I really want to develop the straight lead. Well, I got to do copious repetitions of the straight lead, right? But at some point, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do a 2 count or a combination, right? I'm going to hit straight lead, straight rear, right? And then maybe a hook or something. So the techniques are not outdated because hitting is still hitting. Because it's popular today to do a spinning back fist, right? Or what have you. That doesn't have to become part of your JKD arsenal, right? So if somebody is dumb enough to think, oh, well, in JKD, there's no spinning back fist, there's no this, there's no that, so it's outdated, that's really dumb, right? Training is not outdated. There's still people out there who train calisthenics. Calisthenics, man, I don't know how old that stuff is, but there's still people out there that do what? Pull-ups. How old is the pull-up? There's still people out there who do what? Push-ups. How old is the push-up? Now, there's a ton of variation, let's say, right? And then we have, because of technology, we have things that can help us to develop the push-up. We have resistance bands and what have you that can help you to develop the pull-up and what have you. So yeah, the technology helps us to improve, but we're still doing the original techniques. So this whole idea about stuff being outdated, Simon, I have no idea whether or not that touched on what it is that you wanted me to talk about, but that's my take on it. Okay. All right. James Bishop is here. Hi, James. All right. Let's see if there was anything else. Terry Valor, if you had to pick one, if I had to pick one, Silat, Kali, or Thai. All right. So I'll play that game, Terry. And I'm going to imagine, even though you didn't say it, I'm going to imagine that it must be one of those, right? You see, okay? Then it's going to be Kali, right? And it's going to be Kali because the way that Kali has been passed on to me is very JKD influenced. Now, if I have a little bit of wiggle room in answering your question. If I had to pick one, the one that I pick is not on your list of Silat, Kali, or Thai. The one I pick is Jeet Kune, right? But if I play the game where I'm limited to that, and I'll tell you why for me it would be Kali, because Kali helped me to understand Silat. I wouldn't say that Kali helped me to understand Muay Thai, but because Kali is a thing that focuses on the development of, like we have a saying here at Miami Jeet Kune, right? Kali is the art of understanding hand and body motion with or without a weapon for self-defense or for recreation. Okay. So because a lot of the principles and the guidelines in Kali can be transferred into other things, then it would be that. If I play the game your way, if I change the game, then if I have to pick one thing that I'm going to train for the rest of my life, then the one thing is Jeet Kune. Because for me, the practice of Jeet Kune, the training of Jeet Kune is not limited at all to a specific set of techniques. I happen to be somebody who follows the let's call it the more philosophical aspects of Jeet Kune. So my guideline, one of my guidelines, is what Bruce Lee says in 1971 in Liberate Yourself from Classical Karate. I think you can take karate out of there and you can rename that article, Liberate Yourself from Classical Thinking about Martial Art, including Jeet Kune. You see, and it's interesting, right? That article was titled Liberate Yourself from Classical Karate. And then when Ted Wong started his Inside Kung Fu column, it was called Classical JKD. Kind of a coincidence, I would think. But my understanding is that Ted Wong chose the adjective classical not to classicalize JKD, but because it's when you think about something, a work of art, a priceless work of art, you call that a classic, you see? And so that was the framework that Ted Wong was using. Unfortunately, in the martial art world, classical, especially in the Jeet Kune martial art world, the word classical refers to the traditional way that people were doing things as Bruce Lee was growing up in the 40s and 50s and into adulthood in the 1960s. So it's a little bit, it might be a little bit confusing for some people, you know, that term classical was applied to JKD. And, you know, and then we do have some people who I would say do have a classical way, a solidifying way of thinking about Bruce Lee's art and philosophy. Okay. Simon says that he would pick Thai because it's brutally beautiful. All right. Well, that's true, Simon, but I'll tell you what, Kali, Kali can be brutally beautiful as well, right? So we're good. It's a discussion. Scorch asked, what are my thoughts on good mornings? I think there are safer ways of doing that exercise these days, right? I think if you're going to do it, don't make the mistake that Bruce Lee made. Don't warm up. Don't put too much weight on it. I don't consider the good morning to be an exercise that you got to load up the barbell or what have you. I would never be a big fan of that at all. I think you could probably substitute the what do you call it, the Roman chair or the reverse Roman chair or whatever that piece of equipment is. I'll have a bet because I might be returning to the gym in 2024. I might be. I'm not sure yet. I might be returning to the gym. So if I do, in a few weeks, Scorch, I'll have the names of all the pieces of equipment in the gym down. I don't know. I'm getting older, and I think that it might be fun to go back to the gym and instead of pumping body weight and resistance bands, it might be fun to pump a little bit more iron going forward. All right. Hey, Bucky's here. Okay, Michael Perez, how would you explain that JKD is better suited for today's world over arts like Krav Maga and MMA? That JKD is better suited. You know, Mike, what is your favorite candy? James Bishop, you kill me, right? How would I explain that JKD is better? Comparative and superlative terms, Mike, always, or not always, but very often give me a hard time, because comparative and superlative is all opinion. So I don't know that JKD is better suited for today's world, because there's a bunch of people who think that Krav Maga is it. Then there's another bunch of people who think that MMA is it. Now, the little bit that I know about Krav Maga, as far as I understand, the reason why it's so popular is because it focuses, dare I say, 100% on self-defense scenario training. As far as I know, I don't know too much about what training in Krav Maga looks like. I have heard rumors that a lot of their technical base is borrowed or adopted from other arts, right? But I'm not sure. Okay. So if they're kicking and punching and elbowing and kneeing and throwing and what have you, then it's not necessarily, it's not better suited. And now it becomes a matter of personal preference. I'm not sure that I would be able to explain that JKD is better. You know what, Mike, I would never try to prove to somebody that this thing is better. If somebody thinks that something else is better, it's like, all right, fine. You're entitled to your opinion. Now, if somebody says, okay, well, what is it that you love about Jeet Kune? That I can explain. If somebody says, well, for you, is JKD your preference over training in MMA or Krav Maga? Yes, it is. Now, that doesn't mean that I couldn't go to a Krav Maga place and have a good time. In fact, there's a number of JKD people who I respect, who I don't know if they are certified or whatever, but I know that there's a couple of JKD people who have some kind of training in Krav Maga. My understanding, one of the other things that I think I've heard is that Krav Maga is quite similar in its approach to JKD. So if that's true, Mike, if it's quite similar, then better, not necessarily, better becomes, again, like I said, a personal preference thing. So I'd have a hard time explaining that it is. Now, JKD better suited for today's world over arts like MMA. Now, to me, MMA is not an art. MMA is training for combat sports in the ring. It doesn't have anything. Its priority isn't self-defense. Its priority is athleticism and competitiveness in the ring. That's what MMA is. MMA is not a self-defense art or anything like that. So I probably butchered my answer to that question. Okay, James Bishop, my favorite candy. There's a thing that I get from BJ's It's Russell Stover's sugar-free stuff, right? It's like a huge pack of um, um, sugar-free chocolate covered stuff. That I would say that's my James Bishop, right? Um, okay, Mick Tully, who invented Who Bud? Ah, Mick. Well, first of all, right? Mick, did you ever hear this? That somebody was talking about hubad to a Filipino who spoke some dialect or whatever, and it was like, what is this thing about getting naked, right? Because apparently, I don't know if it was the spelling, the pronunciation, or what, but for some people, and then I was told that the actual correct spelling is not Bud but Bad, so it's actually hubad, right? But what do I know, right? We got people who spell paksao, and they spell it POC, as in like paksao. I've even seen, um, the I just saw my good buddy Ron Goldstein is here, so I'm gonna tease him with this, right? The Wong Pak Sao is not Wom, as in WOM. The spelling that I've seen for it is WOANG, Wong Pak, not Wom Pak, like Wombat or what have you, right? So who invented Who Bud? Um, I know who uh, enhanced it. I'm just playing Mick, right? So, but in all seriousness, my understanding is that Tuhon Leogahe is, and I forget what they call what the terminology is in Pikiti Tersha, sa, sa, sagang labo, something else, right? Right, but that is taken actually from a training method of Kakoi Kenyete. Okay, that's my understanding. Now, as my good friend ABL says, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, right? But so I, as far as I know, it's a thing that was derived from Doce Paris and discovered by Inosano in Pikiti Tersha, and then you know how Sifudan is. He picks it up and then takes it in a completely different direction. But it was enhanced by other people, Nick, right? And that is the truth that you deserve, right? Okay. All right. Bucky Barreto says, in your opinion, what was Bucky? I think your question must have gotten cut off, right? Let me scroll down. Yeah. Okay. There we go. What was Bruce's relationship to Wing Chun as time passed on? Well, going back to what I opened up with, the whole letter to Taki Kimura, that Jun Fan is light years ahead of Wing Chun. I think that there's a quote, I think it's in Inosano's Art and Philosophy book, something where Bruce Lee said something about owing a great deal to Wing Chun, an art that, what was the phrase? There's something like a fantastic art or what have you. So even though Bruce Lee had gone, let's say, beyond Wing Chun, he still held the art in high regard, as in my opinion he should, since that was his foundational art. That's the art that gave him a lot of the physical, perhaps even emotional and mental tools that that he kept. right, throughout. So even if his technical base developed beyond pure Wing Chun, I think his relationship was still one of respect and admiration and fondness. It's like your teenage girlfriend, right? You two might grow apart, but you always have fond memories of her. You know what I mean? And if you see a cashier at Publix whose first name on her badge happens to be the name of that significant girlfriend, right, Bucky? So I would say that Bruce Lee's relationship, as time passed on, was a healthy one. I think that he yeah. I mean, I don't want to say that he loved Wing Chun or what have you, but I don't think that he would ever have gotten to the point where he would SHIT on Wing Chun. Not at all. No. If anybody was to ask me, right? What? Michael Perez. Are you saying that you thought that red licorice or Werther's original would be my favorite candy? Good God. No, man. Right? Okay, well, Frank, that's not a question, right? Okay. Mike Yuski, that's funny. Oh man, you guys in the comments, I tell you, right? Well, it's not a question. Okay, Simon says he thinks that compound trapping is for attribute training. Yeah, okay, I could see that, right? Real trapping is in clinch work. Well, real trapping. The thing about clinch work, right, is that how long? Because in the old days, if I remember correctly, in the old days of Muay Thai, clinch, you didn't stay in the clinch. Just like in boxing, the ref would come in and he'd pretty much break people apart. But then I guess over time things changed, and now there's an art, right, to clinching and what have you. But I don't know that in a self-defense scenario we're going to spend a whole lot of time clinching. So this idea of rail trapping being in clinch work, if you're talking, Simon, about split second trapping in order to hit and get out of the clinch or what have you, well, yeah, okay, I'd go with that. What the heck? What does a Werther's man look like, James Bishop? You and Michael Perez, I tell you, right? Okay. All right. Red Tiger says, is it possible that a misguided reverence for Bruce Lee risks making JKD into a static entity that he wished to avoid? You think? Right? Red Tiger, you think? Of course. Was it James Bishop himself who said something about reverence? I think that's what I think it was, that, right? And what was it, James, that yeah, something about reverence, and I forget exactly what it was, but yes, leading into spiritualism or something. But for sure, Tim, because then this reverence for Bruce Lee, they're going to hang on his every word. Okay. So then there is going to be competition as to who is closer or was closer, who knows the most intimate details about Bruce Lee's life or what have you. And there was another post recently, the one about a Jeet Kune man. He kicks too good for a boxer or punches too good for a boxer or whatever. See, I'm not one of those who, the only Bruce Lee quote that I know by heart is real living is living for others. And James Bishop, please feel free to tell us where that came from, because I'm pretty sure it's not an original Bruce Lee quote. But when I first read it in 1975, 1973, I think, right? That one resonated with me. So for me, it's always been a Bruce Lee quote, but I wouldn't be surprised if after the publication of Who Wrote the Tao, that we find out that it came from somewhere else. Doesn't matter, still applies, still has significance to me. But yes, Tim, misguided reverence will definitely cram and distort that which was once fluid. Okay, for sure. It's always possible to overvalue JKD because of its founder. Now that's an interesting one, James. Overvaluing JKD. See, so that kind of goes back to what Michael Perez was asking, how to explain that JKD is better, right? Now, I'm not saying that Mike is necessarily or automatically overvaluing JKD, but it could lead some people to doing just that, right? JKD is the best thing in the world. Why is it the best thing in the world? Because it's the style founded by Bruce Lee, and Bruce Lee was the best in the world. Best what? There are people who could kick better than Bruce Lee. There are people who were stronger than Bruce Lee. There are people who were faster than Bruce Lee. Okay? Doesn't mean that he wasn't influential, obviously. Doesn't mean that he wasn't influential. But yeah, if you start thinking in terms of, if you start thinking in comparative and superlative terms, yes, then you do end up running the risk of overvaluing. There are millions of people in the world who have developed good martial arts skills, whether for practicality or functionality or just good demonstrative ability, and they never done anything in JKD. So yeah, let's not be guilty of overvaluing it. There's value to a lot of stuff out there besides JKD. But for us, JKD is our chosen vehicle, right? So cool. Let's do everything that we can to put it forward, right? Promote, promulgate, perpetuate, etc., etc. But let's avoid behaving as if, well, the whole world is lost without JKD, when, dare I say, the majority of the martial arts world is not training in JKD. In fact, ain't that a shame? Because we know what we know. And wouldn't it be groovy if more people knew what we know? And so shouldn't that be our priority, to increase and disseminate the knowledge about JKD and have it spread to more people in the world? Shouldn't that be our priority versus enhancing Hubud? Right? Let's see. List only. Mick Tully. Well, so Mick, views on Bruce becoming messianic. Well, wait. So let me think about religion. The Messiah is supposed to return, right, Mick? So, or is the Messiah just the savior? I'm not sure. Okay. So yeah, this is right along the lines of what Red Tiger and Dr. Bishop were talking about. Again, man, I see it literally every day. Somebody, right, in other parts of the internet, somebody carrying on about Bruce Lee and how Bruce Lee could take on anybody at any weight class, right, in any type of competition and what have you. I'm happy to say none of the people here, right, none of you guys are like that, but yeah, there are some out there. Michael, I'm not too sure that the curriculum as the gospel truth is the very reason that he closed the schools down. Okay, I'm not too sure that that's actually correct. Simon says the principles of any art can definitely be applied to any art to make them more efficient. The principles of JKD, right? Are they unique to JKD? Did they originate with JKD, or were the principles of JKD developed through Bruce Lee's observation of those principles somewhere else, in something else? That's my question for you guys. Okay. Ricard's here. Del Mountain, have you ever encouraged any of your students to pressure test their Kali skills at a Dog Brothers event? No, I never have. Higher consciousness through harder contact. As a lover of language, I appreciate a lot of alliteration. Okay. So I love that saying. If Mark Denny came up with it, higher consciousness through harder contact. I love it. I think it's a great slogan. I don't agree with it. So no, I have never encouraged any of my students to pressure test their Kali skills at a Dog Brothers event. No, there's other ways to pressure test your Kali skills. I'm going to pull what's her name? The woman that's running for president, Nikki Haley. I'm going to pull a Nikki Haley on Kevin Seaman. What would she say? Way to go with the easy. No, way to go with an easy question. Way to ask me an easy question, or something. Whatever. Right. I'm not too up on the politics thing. But what was the biggest turning point for personal growth in your life, and when? Again, with the superlatives, right? So now I got to talk about one, right? Because there can't be more than one. Although I can think of three. So give me a second. Let me think. Probably when Eastern Airlines folded, and I had to make the choice between staying in the airline industry by applying at American Airlines, which meant starting at the bottom after having been in the industry for 13 years, or making a go of becoming full-time in martial art. Because like everybody else, and I wouldn't be surprised, Kevin, if it was similar for you in 1983, because I think, Kevin, you started with Inasano in 82, if I'm correct. In 1983, when I met those guys, and then we went down to the Kali Academy, and then as the years went by, in 84, when Sifudan moved to the Marina del Rey school and all that stuff, when I saw, and I met people who, Terry Gibson, Rick Fay, Cliff Lenderman, all those people, and everybody had a school. I was like, I think I'll do that too. But school as a hobby or avocation, airline as vocation. So the question for me, Kevin, was always, do I try to get to upper level management in the airline industry and keep martial art as a sideline? Or, because in 1989, when we first got sent home, I boosted the class schedule at the warehouse, so much so that when they called me back, so we got sent home in January of 89. When they called me back in April of 89, I was having so much fun being a full-time martial artist that I actually didn't go back. I said, no, I don't want to come back, because they wanted me to come back and work on the ramp. And I wasn't, I was into that. But by the time they called me again in September to go back to passenger services, I was running out of money and what have you. So I needed to do that. But then 2 years later, because I went back in 89, September of 89, I went back part-time. So I was able to do airline part-time and martial art full-time. So without even having to answer my own question, the roadmap was kind of laid out for me. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, Kevin, but it was that. Losing the, let's call it the corporate job, and having to become a full-time, learning to become a full-time martial artist, I would say that was the biggest turning point. Okay. Mike Yuski. See, here's what he says. It's very interesting, similar in some ways to JKD, because Mike is now head instructor at Premier Martial Arts. And the little bit that I know, Premier Martial Arts, at least here in Broward County, our neighbors up north, Krav Maga, I think, is the central, is the main art taught inside the Premier Martial Art system, I think, right? So Mike is more qualified to talk about this than I am. So if he says it's similar in some ways to JKD, then yeah, okay, cool. All right. Okay. Both Krav Maga and JKD are about pressure testing. Right. Right. Okay, cool. Scort says he has a great deal of respect for the Dog Brothers because so much of what they do is in line with the pressure testing aspect of Jeet Kune. Yes, cool. I figured peanut brittle. Really? Oh, man. All right. Rick Fay had a laugh about the last time we was there. We know who says he invented Hubad. No, he doesn't. He doesn't say he invented. He invented his own drill, which looks very similar. But see, Mick, his drill, which looks very similar to what we know as Hubad, I think that's evidence that Kali and JKD are very related. You know, so when Inasano or Bustillo talk about how the JKD enhance their Kali, or how the Kali enhance their JKD, and then we have people who create a JKD drill that they teach in their school that looks very similar. I think it underscores, I'm using that word all the time now, I think it underscores the relationship, the technical relationship between Kali and JKD, even if that wasn't the intention. I think that's definitely one of the intentions. So Simon says, doesn't mean you have to spend time. Trapping happens a lot in clinch. Okay, cool. All right. What is up with these? What is up with these questions? Jason Bourne or someone better? That's a tough one because Jason Bourne is trained by Jeff Imada and John Wick is trained by Chad Stahelski, you know? So that's you know, I can't really pick, right? But I go with Jason Bourne simply because from what I've seen, he does less with the handguns. He does more with the empty hands or what have you, right? Thank you, Terry. That's a good one. Okay, Simon, what is it that makes you choose JKD as your structure over, let's say, Muay Thai? Oh, well, okay, all right. So specifically Muay Thai. What's big in Muay Thai? Right? The rear round kick, the rear knee, the rear elbow. Okay? So everything, not everything, but a lot of Muay Thai is coming from the rear, as opposed to JKD, which comes with the lead. So Muay Thai has the foot jab, the lead foot jab, the long foot jab, but so much more of its technical base is with the rear. In fact, in Muay Thai, it was Muay Thai Thursday for us just yesterday. In Muay Thai, if you do what's called a switch kick, that's so, and you, most of you guys probably know this, if you do the switch kick, that's like an abbreviated lead change. So now the kick is coming from the rear somewhat. So that structure of dependence on the rear limb is, to me, that's not advantageous. So that's one of the things that would make me choose JKD structure over Muay Thai. But there's not anything that would stop me from continuing to train Muay Thai or continuing to teach Muay Thai. In fact, there might be an opportunity in 2024 for me to start a Muay Thai program, restart a Muay Thai program. I'm older now than I used to be, so I don't know that I want to take on too much of that responsibility or what have you. But we'll see. But let me tell you, man, you know, we have another saying that we have here in Miami, Jeet Kune, is that Muay Thai, one of the greatest things about Muay Thai is that even if you do it in slow motion, you still huff and puff. And that's got to be good for you. That's got to be good for you, right? If there's something out there that just a couple minutes of it and you're huffing and puffing, why give that up? But in terms of structure, efficiency, this dependence on coming from the rear, the rear limb, not so much. So that's something that that I wouldn't, that would force me to change it, right? Hey, Big Tim, the parallels between Bruce and Jesus, their death at same age, spreading of the art system of beliefs. Yeah, it's what is that? An archetype, Dr. Bishop? Is that what's that? That's, I think, isn't that called? Yeah, that's called an archetype, I think, right? Bucky Barreto, Bolo Young versus Bruce Lee. I'm not qualified to answer this question, Bucky. I defer to the world infamous Beardy, right? If you want to know about Bolo Young and Bruce Lee, right? Or Bolo Young versus Bruce Lee. But my money would be on Bruce Lee. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So Tim says you don't need to do it like the Dog Brothers to pressure test your collar. Of course not. Right. And, you know, for those of you who don't know, I mean, and I'm sure everybody does, Tim Becker is, he hangs out almost every day at the place that gave birth to the Dog Brothers. All right. So, right. Simon says that the principles of JKD are not unique to JKD. They're found elsewhere. Right. Yeah, of course. Billy Brown, good to see you, man. Hope you're doing good. Billy says, the last time I was attacked with a weapon, I left my fencing mask and hockey pads at home. Now I have this huge scar that won't quit. I should have tested more at Dog Brother events. Yes, I'm sure. I'm sure, Billy Brown. Um, so Michael says, wanted to avoid the curriculum being taken. So again, Michael, that whole thing about the curriculum being taken might have been, this is what I've heard, this is what I've been told, acted as somewhat as coverage, right? Rather than saying, look, these things are not financial successes. The dues being paid at Chinatown don't even cover the rent. So I'm not going to be able to be around as much and what have you. So why even continue with it? So take the most dedicated people to your backyard and train them there. But see, saying that doesn't sound as cool as, it's possible for the students to mistake the curriculum as the way and the agenda as the truth and whatever that quote is. So that highfalutin reason for the closing of the schools might not have been. It might actually have just been a commonplace, low-class financial decision. Can't support itself. Look, I know about that. I was just telling you in answer to Kevin Seaman's question about part-time martial arts, full-time airline. There were some months where the paycheck from Eastern Airlines helped to pay the rent for the warehouse. But at some point, I had to grow up and realize, look, if you're in business, you're in business. You better learn about the business of martial arts and then when that airline paycheck went away, then you definitely had to bite the bullet, so to speak. You definitely had to bite down and do what's necessary to pay your bills. So again, it sounds better to talk in fancy terms about students mistaking curriculum and whatever. But the reason why I give a little bit of credence to the thing about wasn't paying for itself is that who was there that was teaching a so-called curriculum in a way that any of the students at the Chinatown school would have thought that it was gospel truth? Not in 1970. That was not going on. There was nobody at the Chinatown school that was thinking, this is it. This curriculum that we're being given, this is the ultimate curriculum. This is the truth in martial art. No, that was not going on. So I'm this idea, this highfalutin idea, to me is a little bit suspect. A little bit. Okay. Not a lot, a little bit suspect. Right. Who's on my JKD Mount Rushmore? Well, Mount Rushmore has 4 people on it, right? Terry, okay. I'm going to play with your question again. If I could put as many people on my Mount Rushmore as I want, then it'd be Bruce Lee, Dan Inosanto, Cass Magda, Chris Kent, Tim Tackett, and me. Right? If I could, right? Um, no, actually, Burt Richardson would be up there before me. I would put myself last, right? But it would definitely start with Bruce Lee and then Dan Inosanto as 1 and 2, right? And I think Cass would definitely be 3. Chris would be 4. Um, um, Burt Richardson would be up there. Paul Vunak would be up there. Um, Tim Tackett would be up there. Um, I'm trying to make sure I don't leave out anyone who was instrumental. Okay, and then me. Now, if it can only be 4 people, excluding myself, the way Mount Rushmore is, then it's Bruce Lee, Dan Inosanto, Cass Magda, Chris Kent. Pretty much. Or Bruce Lee, Dan Inosanto, Cass Magda, Tim Tackett. See, because Tackett and Kent, like, I spent more time physically training with Tim Tackett than I have with Chris Kent, but it's Chris's books. Now, of course, you guys know that Chris wrote Jeet Kune Kickboxing and Junfan and Jeet Kune the textbook with Tackett, but Chris's A to Z JKD and then his video series and what have you. I got a ton of stuff from that. So again, if I have to limit myself to 4, that's it. If I can do more than 4, then it's those people, Terry. Great question. I love it. Okay. All right. So Dr. Bishop says Christian idea appears in Christian literature. But James, do we know, based on the books in Bruce Lee's library, is it possible that he took it from there? So like this Christian Advocate, 1921, do we know if that's something that was in his library and so he possibly took it from that as a source? Okay. All right. Red Tiger, I'm not sure because again, I'm behind you guys making the comments. Some of his biggest supporters were people who never met him. Tim, are you referring to Red Tiger, not Becker? Are you referring to Bruce Lee or to Jesus? Right? And some who would control his legacy never met him. Again, Bruce Lee or Jesus, right? Oh, really, Tim? Krav Maga is similar to JKD because modern Krav was pretty much invented by Pat Trey. Huh. So there is Uri Lichtman Krav Maga, or whatever the official founder, and then there's modern Krav Maga. So they got original and concepts too, huh? Okay, Scorch says, what do you think about people who blend Wing Chun's trap-in techniques with empty hand Kali techniques when they have not mastered either? Well, I mean, what? Scorch, are you saying that? Are you asking if people should stick to one thing, right, before they move to another thing? See, because I studied French, Spanish, English, and Latin all at the same time. And I was able to see the connection between them. And sometimes you go, oh, look at this word that comes from the Latin, and it's very similar in the French, but then for some reason the Spanish is completely different. But then you come around again, and now there's a word that's similar in across the board in all four languages. You see what I'm saying? Right? So sometimes there's commonalities or similarities, and sometimes there's not. So if somebody finds similarity or commonality between Wing Chun and Kali, empty hands, and they're able to blend them together, I don't see, to me, that's not a big deal. The important thing is, do they do it well? Are they adhering to the important principles? Are they following the important guidelines? If you're just being fancy, right? So for example, I hate to see people demonstrating these trapping techniques and demonstrating and not trying to hit because they're trying to trap. And the idea behind trapping is not to try to trap. The trapping is what Bashara, what did Larry Hartzell say? Accidental, if not incidental, right? I think that comes from Larry Hartzell. So the idea isn't to try to hit somebody and try to trap them. No, the trapping occurs as a consequence of your hit not being successful. You see? So the whole idea, even if they're blending Kali and Wing Chun, is not, is it working? Does it work? That's what's important. You see? So Scorch, if you were talking about, they should stick to one thing first and then go on to the next one and what have you, I think the similarities, if they see the similarities, that could shortcut their learning. But again, it goes back to, is it efficient? Is it effective? Is it functional? Is it practical? Okay. Anthony Labrador wants to know, how long does it take to certify someone who has interest in teaching? Oy. Oy. First, the horror stories. Back in the day, there were people who certified other people in a weekend. $999, and you got a certificate as an instructor. Okay? There were people who would be given the title ambassador for whatever. There are people who could be given the title of disciple, like after the first time meeting and what have you. So how long does it take to certify someone who has an interest in teaching? As long as it takes. Okay? Sometimes a short time, sometimes a medium length time, sometimes a long time. Now, here's the more important thing. What's the certification process? You see? So I made up a word one time. A lot of people are certificated because they've been given certificates. But are they certified? What did they do to qualify to be instructors? Did they take a test? Was their progress, right? Was it observed and noted and recorded and cataloged and examined and critiqued. And in other words, was there a governing system for these people who had an interest in teaching? Or was it something like, okay, there's an instructor program, you pay to join or you don't pay to join or whatever, you show up a certain amount of hours, those hours are recorded, and then as time passes by, your title is changed or what have you. To me, that's certificated. That's not certified. Certified, it's like because I took the car in a little while ago. So this certification thing that you might have in an auto repair shop, I don't know that they just hand it out. I think you gotta test. You have to be tested, and you have to prove that you have the knowledge. So to me, you got to prove that you have not just the knowledge, not just the skill, but you got to prove that you know how to teach the bloody stuff too. You see? So to paraphrase my favorite Canadian JKD senior, Cass Magda, show me your product. Show me your top guy, right? Show me your top guy who can fight. Show me your top guy who can teach. And then we'll know whether or not he's certified. Okay. So if you ask me for my opinion on it, Anthony, that's how I would break it down. But how long does it take? It varies. Some people give away the certification, and some people do it what I would call the right way. Okay. Mick, really? I recently heard Del. I recently heard a story about Bolo Young getting completely worn out from sparring with Bruce Lee on the set of Enter the Dragon. Bolo's muscle caused him to be fatigued within 2 minutes of sparring. Yeah, we might have heard the same story. This is a beardy story, Del Mountain. So, suspect. Right? Greg Kennedy says, it's not the art, but the artist. That's something that in other parts of the internet, Greg, that's very, very often a part of my answer to some of the ridiculous questions that I get. It's never the art, because no art can be superior to any other art. No art. It's like objects on okay. You guys will get to see some of the crap on my table here, right? Is this the Vicks inhaler better than the rub, right? It all depends. You're right. So no, Muay Thai is not better than JKD. Just on paper. It takes the human being to animate it. So it's never the art. It's always the artist. Because if not, then people who train in a particular art would always come out on top in all kinds of situations. In order for something to be better, in order for something to be the best, it means that it has to be 100% on top 100% of the time. And that has not happened in Miami since 1972. For those who understand the reference. I'm just saying that because apparently the Dolphins are 11-4 this year, this season. They play on Sunday, and I plan to watch the game because I'm one of those what do you call it? Fair weather fans, right? So, okay. Math on a Bury. Greg, don't forget Larry Hartzell. Greg, I'm not sure if this is, again, I apologize, guys. I'm way behind you when it comes to the comment. And so I'm not sure if this is in reference to my, Mount Rushmore. Okay. So I spent very little time with Larry Hartzell. The time that I did spend was extremely valuable. But if you talk about hours spent with someone, then Larry Hartzell doesn't come into my playbook as much as he does for somebody like Chris Brown, somebody like Leif Robeck, somebody like Tim Becker, somebody like Ron Kosakowski, somebody like Mick Shore, somebody like, and now I'll leave out somebody else, right? But those guys, Larry Hartzell was a central feature. Somebody like Rick Fay, right? Larry Hartzell was a central feature for those guys. In 1983, when I met Larry Hartzell, I was 126 pounds. Okay. I did not have this stuff, right? There was no way that I was letting him get a hold of me. Even though if I ever find, because I think these scumbags stole my early notebooks and my photo album. But if I ever do find them, I could show you a picture of me and Larry Hartzell at Redondo Beach in July or August of 1983, right? But I'm smarter than to let Larry Hartzell get a hold of me, right? But okay, so not that he wasn't valuable, not that he isn't extremely valuable to a ton of people, right? Not that he wasn't a great guy and what have you, but I just didn't spend that much time with him, Greg. Martino Bonk, how long training JKD per lesson? That's an individual thing. Whoever it is that's teaching, whoever it is, however it is that they set up their class schedule, that's a completely individual thing. Okay, Tim says about Krav. I make Tully leave things alone. Right. Mark Black says, yep, trapping is a byproduct of trying to hit, remove the barrier, hit again. Yes, Aubrey. Red Tiger says, do you think it's a good idea to be eclectic in your learning and syncretic in your practice? I have to, Red Tiger, I have to remember to fix in my head the definition of syncretic. But you and I have discussed this before, and you're a brilliant individual. So yes, I do think it's a great idea. Okay. Simon says, if you're hidden, you really shouldn't need to trap. If there's an obstruction, you second, third, right. Yeah. Okay. Right. Lee Gross says, went to weekend training, got my bachelor's degree, going to teach. Anthony said, I figured it might be a multi-layer. Yes, it is. Right. There should not be a time scale for certification, says. Okay, so Billy Brown was, isn't it humorous or frightening? It's both. It's hilarious because we know better, but it's also frightening, Billy, because we do know better, right? But Beardy, somebody said on Wednesday, I guess he has mastered the algorithm, or if it isn't him who has mastered the algorithm, it's the YouTube itself, whatever the behind the scenes stuff is. But I mean, the guy's got 400,000 subscribers, and over 7 years, 11 million views on Bruce Lee's Only Real Fight. So, like I said on Wednesday, I have a perverse admiration for his ability to produce those kinds of numbers. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if my I Love Jeet Kune broadcast or the Jeet Kune dialogues, if those channels on the YouTube had 400,000 subscribers? Wow. Yeah, man. Okay. So, there's a martial arts school in Miami, Scorch says, that teaches Aikido, Judo, and Jiu-Jitsu. I wonder if having a black belt at that school means that a person is certified in all. I have no idea, Scorch. I really couldn't tell you. All right. Aaron Simon says, I was watching a video where the person said it's not the art, it's the fighter and how they use it. Yes, exactly. Yep. Okay. All right. So I think right, there we go. Thanks, Mark Black, right? Mark's referring to Wednesday's I Love Jeet Kune broadcast. So Beardy has figured out the algorithm. Cool, right? Okay, and Lee Arroyo says, yeah, Lee, I'm with you. It is unfortunate. I mean, so somebody who's 30 years old, right? So you're born 20 years after Bruce Lee died. If you don't come across somebody who is, for lack of a different expression, an authority on Bruce Lee in order to point you in the right direction and give you the proper information and what have you, yeah, things can go awry really, really quickly. But like I said on Wednesday, this is just, to me, it's just evidence that those of us who are invested in educating and informing people about Jeet Kune need to stop the childish backing and forthing between original and concepts, Inasano and Wong. Inasano confusing people, need to stop all that nonsense and do a better job of making sure that there are more 30-year-old and 20-year-old people like Lee Arroyo, people who know the truth about Bruce Lee and his contributions and what JKD can do for the world. All right. Okay, so let me answer. Jerry had sent me a couple of questions, so let me do this, and then we'll wrap this up. Jerry wanted to know how has your training changed from when you were younger and until today? Well, that's not it's not rocket science. I don't have the flexibility. I mean, look, all the physical stuff goes downhill. They say it all starts to go downhill after age 18, right? So, so now there's no way. Back in between 1989 and 1995, for 6 years, right? I'd wake up, I would run from 8th Street on Miami Beach, sometimes all the way up. One time I ran up to 90 something street and then discovered I had to turn around and come back. But I would run maybe about 4 miles, okay, from 8th Street north, 2 miles north, turn around, come back down. Then I would jump into the water and I would swim a mile. And then I'd go home, take care of stuff, get to the warehouse, and then I would do maybe 30 minutes of hitting the bag Muay Thai style. Okay. If I tried to do that today, I would die. In fact, I might die just thinking about that. Right? So the physical starts to go, but you do your best at whatever age it is. Sifu Dan tells us all the time, every 5 years, if not every 10 years. Tim, correct me if I'm wrong about the quote. But he was one, and the first time I heard him say, I laughed it off. I was like, what is he talking about? Because I had this idea that I would always be in the phenomenal shape that I was in, in the 90s and what have you. Right. In 1983, when I met Inosano, I wasn't necessarily, I wasn't the biggest, I wasn't the fastest, I wasn't the strongest. But man, it was tough for people to outlast me. Right. I had endurance, like ridiculous endurance. I only weighed 126 pounds. I didn't have a whole lot to move around, So anyhow, so in training now is not the time for me to be training to get faster. Now is not the time for me to be training to get more powerful or what have you. What I got. Now, when you get older, it's about maintenance. It isn't necessarily about acquisition. Now, doesn't mean that you don't go fast and you don't go hard. But what you discover is that going hard and going faster, you cannot go as long as you used to. I hate how that sounds, but you understand what I'm saying. Right? So the training, you still do the things that you were always doing. Burt Richardson over on his page, like he shows that he does Carenza every morning on the beach in Hawaii. Who wouldn't, right? So if we put that in the JKD context, yeah, you still hit the bag, you still shadow box, you still hit the focus mitts, you still hit the kick shield, right? You still work on the fundamentals and what have you. You just might not be able to do it for as long a period of time or as intense as before, right? But the training, I don't think it changes drastically, right? Jerry's other question was, do you have any recommendations on how to train, right, while still keeping one skill functional and keeping your body in shape? Well, that's pretty much the same question, right? If you have identified what functionality is for you, you keep doing it, okay? And you do it to the best of your ability. The that thing about calculating, what's it called? Calculating your max VO2, right? And therefore, and getting then, target heart rate and maximal heart rate and all that stuff, right? Yeah, I think you can still, the whole your age minus 220 and what have you, right? So for me, my age minus 220, I'm left with 20. Right? I think you could still use that, or maybe I think there's a more scientific version of that where you measure your resting heart rate over like a 3-day period or something when you wake up, and then that has to factor in with the age and the 220 thing. You all know the formula I'm talking about, right? I think that's probably still a good guideline. So what you realize then is that your target heart rate, you might get there a lot faster. Look, I back in October, I have an old girlfriend who, it's a tradition to do what she calls birthday burpees, and so she turned 46. So as a friend of hers, I did 46 burpees on her birthday, and decided, this was back in October, and decided to add those into my 3 times a week workout. I don't do 46 every workout though. I do 30, and I don't do 30. I don't do 1 to 30. Right? I go 1 to 10, then I do something else, and a few minutes later I come back. I do 11 to 20, right? And then I come back and then I finish off, 21 to 30 or what have you. If I did 30 right off the bat, I would die. But anyhow, I digress. So you calculate all those things, right? And you just all the things that you've learned to do to keep yourself healthy, you keep doing them. You make the modifications where and when necessary. You still train flexibility. I can't kick the way I used to kick when I was, 16 years old or what have you. Okay. But I still work on flexibility, a few times a week. I still work on high kicking to the best of my ability now. Right. Okay. Last one from Jerry. What area of JKD, for example, intercepting, kickboxing aspect, footwork, etc., do you feel is most overlooked? In your opinion, in today's modern world of Jeet Kune? Well, it's definitely not the kickboxing aspect. I think there are a lot of people who work on the kickboxing. I don't know that people. I'll tell you something that I've observed, Jerry. I've seen people practice their footwork and then forget to apply their footwork. Okay, that's something I've seen. So in their kickboxing, they don't use footwork, right? So they don't, when they walk into the kick, so to speak, right? They step into the punch, so to speak. And that needs work for sure. What was the other thing you said? Intercepting. Now, there's definitely people in JKD who work on intercepting, but see, it would be foolhardy to not emphasize interception. But to pull off interception 100% of the time, that's not an easy thing to do. So you better have some other arrows in your quiver, in your counteroffensive quiver, besides interception. But I would say that there are some people who, because of the cross training element, they might neglect maintenance of the fundamentals, right? If they're running a school, they might neglect the development of the fundamentals. You see? Because it's cool to be changing stuff up all the time rather than drilling down on what's important. It's also challenging, right? It's also challenging, Jerry, to discover or uncover exactly hang on a second. I just saw Scorch's his comment here that you know the person. Scorch, really? Scorch, send me what do you call it, DM or something, right? Or email me jkdrebel@gmail. That's very interesting, Scorch. I'd love to find out if you really know if that's true. So email me, or because you're on the YouTube, so email me jkdrebel@gmail and tell me about that. That's very interesting. Okay, what was I saying, Jerry? Yeah. So what was I saying? God damn it. Yeah, whatever. Right. So, okay, let's go back to. Okay, so you guys are answering Anthony's thing about being 42. 42. My God. 42. I started with Inasano in 83. So if I look around in storage, I might find a t-shirt that is as old as Anthony. Right? Okay, Simon says, what do original and concepts have in common? Again, when you guys talk about Jeet Kune concepts, what do you know what you're talking about? See, because one of the arguments that we have going on is that JKD concepts. Let me see if I can remember the term exactly. JKD concepts is it was set up so that people could style hop, right? That JKD concepts was to give people a license to train in other arts and call it Jeet Kune, so that they could like benefit off the name Jeet Kune. JKD concepts was what was the other thing? It was like a money making venture, right? To water down Bruce Lee's art, but make money off of it, and what have you, right? So I kind of would like to understand when people talk about JKD concepts. So a question like this, Simon, what does original JKD have in common with JKD concepts? Well, let's play that game that there is actually a thing. Original JKD is an art that's founded on what? Techniques, principles, concepts, what? Okay? The guidelines for original Jeet Kune come from where? So if there's no concepts in original Jeet Kune, then what are we doing? What's the guidelines? What are we following? What are we applying? So then if there's another thing called, if there's another so-called separate thing called JKD concept. So if in one thing, in original Jeet Kune, what we do is we apply the concepts of Jeet Kune. And then in Jeet Kune concepts, we apply the concepts of Jeet Kune. You see? So you got to be accurate. You got to know what it means, what is meant by JKD concepts. Now, I'll tell you what my understanding of it is. Bruce, so I'll pretend to be Dan Inosanto, right? So I'll paraphrase him. Bruce Lee said, I'd be very disappointed if you were to commercialize Jeet Kune. All right, so we'll close the backyard school. I mean, we'll close the Chinatown school, take people in the backyard, and we'll train. Okay? So it's a little thing. It's like 6 people. After a little while, that number doubled or what have you. Bruce Lee passes away. God damn, what the hell do we do now? Well, I get this letter from Steve McQueen. He says, look, man, do your thing, right? Just like Bruce was doing his thing. Okay, so here's what we'll do. We'll get a warehouse and we'll open up a school. And so that we'll continue to feed our martial arts habit, right? We'll call it the Junfan Gung Fu and Filipino Kali Academy. Well, right? Well, they didn't know right away, but you could see why all of that got shortened to the Kali Academy. Probably another reason why it got shortened to the Kali Academy was because Kali played a major role there, but there were what people would call the Junfan class and the Kali class. And then there was the separate semi-private JKD class that you had to be voted into and all that. You guys know the history and what have you, right? Why are we talking about this again? So this is what happens when you get old and you start to talk too much, right? So that goes on 74 to 84. Around 1979, 1980, people start asking for information, the cult of Bruce Lee, so to speak. The fame and popularity, posthumously, of course, of Bruce Lee keeps growing. And so now it's like, well, will you come teach a seminar on this thing? Well, oh, shoot. Now, this thing about not commercializing Jeet Kune Do, what do we do? All right, so here's what we'll do. The same way that at the Kali Academy, we explain to people from the get-go, what you're learning here is not Jeet Kune Do. It's kind of like a general self-defense course, and it features a little, you look in Asano's book, it talks about some Western boxing, some Kali, some maybe jiu-jitsu, maybe even a little bit of Kempo, I think he says in the book, or what have you. The JKD class is a separate thing. Now, when you go on seminars, like, okay, there is no way on seminar, you got 30, 40, 50, 60, some seminars, 100 people. There is no way that this personalized art of Jeet Kune Do can be taught that way. All right, but what can we do? We can talk about and illustrate and demonstrate concepts of Jeet Kune Do. We can't develop them as Jeet Kune Do fighters, because that's not how it works. So it's kind of like, I can show you a series of techniques that exemplify a Jeet Kune Do training principle, a Jeet Kune Do concept. So I'll do that. But to teach you Jeet Kune Do, that's got to be a much more private thing, perhaps even a one-on-one thing, but definitely a more intimate thing. But out there on the seminar circuit, I can illustrate. And you know what? I can even use another art, because in showing you another art, what I'm illustrating is that, like we discussed earlier, so that's Dwight talking, not Asano, right? Like we just discussed about the principles being found elsewhere. So on seminar, now I'm in Asano again. On seminar, I could show you how these principles can be found in other arts, Muay Thai, Kali, or whatever. I can show you how, if I take the Jeet Kune Do principle, I can insert it into an art where it may not have previously existed. You see? And in doing that, what I'm showing you is universal brotherhood between martial arts. Okay, now I'm done paraphrasing Dan and Asano. And again, that none of that is quotes, or that's just my opinion on what was the original question, right? That's just my opinion on this so-called difference between original Jeet Kune Do and Jeet Kune Do concepts. I wish that I mean, I can't do it, but I wish that I was able to never have to utter those phrases again. But it can't happen, right? Because, the ignorance continues. Okay. All right. So was that, yeah, I think that's it, guys. And we're coming up on 1:45. So there's that goddamn thing. Scorch, you better email me. Otherwise, I'll be very upset. Right. So Lewis wants to know what happened to power in the punches. I don't see it like Bruce Lee would train for the same in Wing Chun. Well, Lewis, I don't know who you're watching or what you're watching, because, it depends on what it is that people are putting out there. So I don't know that there's a bunch of people who are putting out videos. See, because the thing about putting videos out is that you want people to look at it. So if you want people to look at your video, you can't put a boring video. So who's going to watch a video of you cultivating, right, your punch? See, this is the thing, right? Remember this, right? It's like real fighting. Real fighting is never as pretty as choreographed fighting. You see? So that's why when you do a demonstration, you can't necessarily do a demonstration of real fighting because the audience, they're not going to understand what the heck is going on. So what happened to power and punches? I guarantee you there's still people out there who train to put power in their punches. Now, Lewis, if you're talking about, I mean, I'm limiting this to the JKD world, right? But I just think that, you know, people aren't going to demonstrate that type of thing. If you've got somebody who commits to training, let's say like John Paul Daly, right? If he's doing 300 punches a day or what have you, I don't think that he's going to video that and put that up, because that's not going to be as appealing / attractive, and therefore attract as many views as if he puts a quick clip of himself, you know, in a speedy attack or something a little bit more dynamic. You see? So I wouldn't, so just because you don't see it doesn't mean that nobody's working it. I think it's just because, you know, I would like to put more video out there, but the thing is that that's what I discovered. If you just do what you do and put the camera on it, the end result in this world of social media and scrolling and quick views and video shorts and reels and all that stuff, you got to be doing something that will make people, right, that it will attract their eyes and they'll stick to it for the nanoseconds or whatever it is. So it's better if you're gonna put video out, it's better to do it for the camera as opposed to turn the camera on and do what you do. That is never as exciting as doing it for the camera. So if people are more or more invested in their cultivation, nobody's going to video that and put it out there. So, but I don't think just because you don't see it, Lewis, that means that there's no power in the punch, that people aren't training it. If I understand your question correctly, right? Okay. Hey, Mac. All right. Okay. All right. So, okay. Oh, okay. I see, Simon. Simon wasn't asking what they have in common. It was a statement that they both have JKD in common. Yes. But see, I was going to say that. I was going to be a smart ass, Simon, and go, what do original Jeet Kune and Jeet Kune concepts have in common? Jeet Kune. I was going to leave it at that, but I thought you were asking a question, right? And Lee says, Larry Hartzell said, there's no original JKD. He was changing all the time. That's a good one, right? Launchpad, base art, etc. Right? All right, Bucky. What is commercialization really? Tim, it's like Sifu Asano says, right? If you take $1 for teaching, you're a commercial. Yeah, and this idea, right? You know, this idea that you know, people like Inasano, he's in it for the money. That is the most ridiculous thing, right? And anybody that you hear spouting that nonsense, oh, Dan Inasano is looking to make money off Bruce Lee and what have you. That, let me tell you, people, and I don't even live in LA and train at the Inasano Academy every week, but I could tell you, anybody who says that about Dan Inasano is a raving lunatic, knows nothing about him and his lifestyle. Okay, right? So that's it, right? So yeah, and what's wrong, right? What's wrong with, you think about, take somebody like Kevin Seaman, okay, who's been around for 40 plus years. How much money do you think he has spent traveling and training to acquire his Jeet Kune knowledge? It's probably the same amount, right? Or an equivalent amount to what people pay for high level degrees, PhDs, or whatever, or whatever. So if you're going to study and train as hard in an equivalent manner as somebody studies to learn to be well compensated as a professional, yeah, why can't martial artists be the same thing? Why can't you have martial arts professionals who earn a very good living? What is wrong with that? The idea that in order to make money as a martial artist, especially in Jeet Kune, you automatically have to sell out. That's not true at all. It's not true at all. I think there are more people in other martial arts systems doing more selling out than there are people in JKD, right? But yeah, so commercial. I remember I told you guys this before. I just changed the adjective. So instead of it being commercial, it's professional. It's as simple as that, right? Oh, you commercialize the Jeet Kune. No, I don't. I professionalize it. I do it full time. It's how I make my living. It's how I feed myself, right? So I'm going to do the best job that I can of it. And I'm going to try to get paid as much as I can for what I do. But what does that mean? That means that I have to constantly be in upgrade mode. I have to constantly be working on increasing the value and upgrading the level of what it is that I do. That doesn't mean that you have to have a fancy school and what have you, but it means that you got to be, look, here's the thing, right? You got to be teaching from the heart. Okay. But teaching from the heart does not automatically mean that you have to be a pauper. It doesn't. And this Jeet Kune thing that we have as our superpower to put out there in the world is one of the most valuable things. And I'll tell you why. We've talked about this before. There are people who don't know about Jeet Kune, but know about Bruce Lee. And back in my days when I used to write my blog for my school, I used to point out to people that Bruce Lee was pretty much an example of almost any desirable human quality, right? In other words, was Bruce Lee disciplined? Was Bruce Lee dedicated? Was Bruce Lee strong-willed? Okay, take the Napoleon Hill principles, right? I was talking to somebody about those the other day. Michael Brown, right? Take the Napoleon Hill principles of success, and then based on what you know about Bruce Lee, ask yourself if whether or not Bruce Lee was an example of those principles of success, right? So that's one of the things that makes it valuable. That's one of the things that we can use in selling, in commercializing, in professionalizing our Jeet Kune. Use Bruce Lee as a paragon, not a paragon of virtue, okay? But use Bruce Lee as a paragon of self-development, a paragon of self-actualization. Because remember, that's what ultimately Jeet Kune is, right? Okay, all right, so let me just make sure there's nothing else here. Mount Rushmore, I'm having a dumb, Okay. You guys hear me say this all the time. I wish I had a lieutenant, a second in command that could feed me these comments in real time. Because when I scroll, I can't tell if you guys are talking to me or if somebody is replying to something that somebody else said, right? Um, Justin Earhart wants to know, is there a better name to talk just about Guru Dan's way of JKD? I always called it the Inasano method. No, there's no such thing. There's no Inasano method of JKD. See, and Justin, this is not directed at you specifically, okay? But no, there's the Inasano method of what? There is no Inasano method of Jeet Kune, because then that would mean that what the heck does that mean, the Inasano method? All right. And what? Okay. If you're saying the Inasano method is, if that's a way of talking about the approach that Dan Inasano uses, all right, then yeah, okay, that's fine, Justin, I guess, right? But see, the thing, look, it's bad enough that we have something called Jeet Kune concepts, right? So, Justin, if what you're saying is that the phrase Jeet Kune concepts irritates, annoys, angers other people, and so it's a disputed term, and so you're saying, why don't we replace it with the Inasano method of Jeet Kune, just so people aren't as annoyed? Then I get that, right? And to a certain degree, I might even say I agree with you to a certain degree. But the problem with saying, oh, the Inasano method of JKD is that we are now identifying the guy chosen by Bruce Lee to lead the Chinatown group as somebody who has drifted away from Bruce Lee and incorporated his own method. So that's the issue that I would have with it. Okay. But if you're just talking about, since people are annoyed by Jeet Kune concepts, let's call it the Inasano method. Okay, fine. But then again, I don't think that it actually improves the situation. It just causes a little bit of division once again. And division in Jeet Kune is not something of which I am a great fan, right? So no, it's like you know, in the Filipino martial arts world, there's supposed to be a thing called the Inasano Lacoste method. Let me tell you something. Dan Inasano has trained with so many people, right? That I look. You think it's like, oh yeah, this thing here definitely comes from Lacoste, and this Inasano Lacoste method. Give me a break, right? There's Dan Inasano teaching. That's what there is. Okay. There's Dan Inasano teaching. So anyhow, that's enough, right? So Justin, don't. I hope you're not offended by that. By the way, I started answering your question. I just got carried away a little bit, right? Yes, Lee, this is it. This is it, right? Original Jeet Kune concepts. Yes, that covers everything. I love it, right? Tim says, yeah, just call it JKD. We don't call it anything. Right. Yeah. JKD. That's what it is. Right. Classical JKD concepts. That's a that's a good one too. Right. Inasano method comes from Guru Lonero seminars. Oh, okay. So then, Mark, so then that is Daniel Lonero saying, I'm teaching in my seminars, I'm teaching the way that Sifu, I'm teaching what I learned at the Inasano Academy. So he's calling it the Inasano method, right? Right. Okay. All right. Greg Kennedy says, if Bruce Lee was still alive, I doubt very much if Jeet Kune would even come out of his mouth. How would you know? How could you possibly know that, right, Greg? Based on what? Right. Okay. All right. So we're right at the 2 hour mark. So I think we will close this up, guys. Thank you very much for showing up and hanging out. And Greg says he hated titles. He hated titles. So modified Wing Chun, Jun Fan Gung Fu, Jeet Kune Do. There was something called the Jun Fan method, the Jun Fan method of Kung Fu, the Jun Fan method of boxing. So that's like 5 titles. And he hated titles. Where is the evidence? Where's the evidence of that? I think, Greg, what you're talking about is that after that, Bruce Lee was very concerned about labels and very concerned about, now that he gave a name to his art, people might start to distinguish it or differentiate it as being this versus that, when Bruce Lee was all about not this versus that, but about the isness. You see? So again, Greg, I don't know what the beginner circle and master circle on the t-shirt, on what t-shirt, right? I'm not, I beginner circle and master circle. I don't know what that is. So I don't think that Bruce Lee hated titles. I think Bruce Lee was just very concerned that people would think that his art was a new art that was specifically this or specifically that. Definitely. The old JKD t-shirt. The old JKD t-shirt. There was an old JKD t-shirt, a Bruce Lee old JKD t-shirt, Greg. Does anybody know, Tim Becker, if you're still on, do you know what old JKD t-shirt Greg Kennedy might be talking about? Greg, if you can, when he taught JKD, there was a t-shirt. Man, you're making me strain my brain to come up with an image of this t-shirt. Greg, if you have an image of that t-shirt, the Bruce Lee JKD t-shirt, because the only thing I know about, right? If all right, give me a sec. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. I'm wondering if this is what you're talking about. Let's see. See, if I was a real Inasano man, I would know exactly what page to go to. So I'm wondering Greg, if you're talking about this, right? Let me, this one here. See, because so there's this, there's that, there's this, right? Okay. Let me see if I can get this closer to you guys, right? You see the circle? I guess that's the circle that you're talking about. So the caption under that picture, the caption under this one, right, says, in the beginning, we used to dress in traditional classical Kung Fu uniforms for demonstrations. We found out that in those days, people expected you to look like a Kung Fu man, right? Then in this one, okay, the what we call in Miami the wife beater, Kung Fu outfits in those days were hard to get, and Bruce hated them, especially the black ones with all the fancy white trim. He said, dress any way you want. Most of us wore what we felt was comfortable for workouts. He wanted no emblems or uniforms when we worked out. Watching one of our classes reminded me of watching a pickup football game in the park. This picture is typical of the way we may have dressed. But then under this one with the circle, it says, we then switched to navy blue sweatpants with a white t-shirt trimmed in navy blue with the symbol of an empty circle to indicate nothingness. So I think that might be the one that you're talking about. But I don't think that was during Bruce Lee's time. I think that t-shirt came about after Bruce Lee, right? So that empty circle thing, okay, has nothing to do with Bruce Lee hating labels or titles. You know, I think that circle thing, that circle t-shirt thing might even have become a thing in 74 or after 74. I don't know if it was in the backyard. I really don't. But I don't think that originated with Bruce Lee. I'm fairly sure it didn't originate with Bruce Lee. But to get back to the idea of if Bruce Lee was alive, that the word Jeet Kune wouldn't even come out of his mouth. I don't agree with you on that at all. I think Bruce Lee was very proud of his art, but I think that one of the messages that he tried to convey is, please do not think of Jeet Kune as being separate from things that are out there. Because if you start thinking that, then you're going to close your mind off to something other than that could be helpful to you. I think that was one of the messages. But well, I don't know. I wasn't there. Yes, empty circle, but ranks had color. Ranks had colors. Not that Inasano shirt. Nope. Greg, I think you're confusing that with the colored ranking system of the Junfan Kung Fu Institute. That t-shirt that I showed you that Inasano was wearing, as far as I know, those colors didn't change. The design started to change for sure, right? But the colored ranking thing, that was printed on people's membership cards, if I remember correctly, right? And Greg says again, I think Bruce Lee would have outgrown the name. Well, you're entitled to think what you think, Greg, but I don't know that there's any evidence for that. None of us know whether or not Bruce Lee would have outgrown the name Jeet Kune Do. Why? Why? Interception, the way of the intercepting fist, the idea that interception is the highest level of counteroffense unless we come up with something else that is superior to interception. I don't think there's a reason to outgrow the name. There might be a need to explain, right, that it's called the art of the intercepting fist because we think of interception. So yeah, maybe he'd outgrow the name if he had a better approach, but we don't know. Okay, all right, let's wrap it up there. Thanks, guys, very much for hanging out with me. I want to wish everybody a happy new year. We will do more of this, right, in 2024 because it's a ton of fun, right? But you guys let me know what you think about all this in the comments below. And that's all I am going to say for this video. If you like what you heard, please comment, rate, subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at Dwight Woods and on Instagram at Dwight D. Woods, at paypal.me/UnifiedMA Miami, paypal.me/UnifiedMA Miami. You can pick up your copy, the raw but edited version of the Jeet Kune Journey Volume 1, paypal.me/UnifiedMA Miami. You can also support the show at jkdrebel.com. Click on the Rebel Gear link, and that's where you'll see stuff like this. I do have an idea for a bunch of new designs, t-shirt designs, and all that stuff, right? So we'll see how that goes. I'll have something to announce early in the new year, but this is at jkdrebel.com. Click on the Rebel Gear link, and that's where you'll find this stuff. You can also support the show here on the YouTube. Click the join button, and that's where you will see the different levels of membership. But this is only on the YouTube. So if you guys are catching it on Facebook, you got to go over to YouTube and click the join link there. Everything that we do from the paid memberships, the paid subscriptions, goes towards helping us to produce a higher level of podcast for you. Last but not least, the Jeet Kune Quick Skill Series Volume 1, Junfan Kickboxing. So this is a quick, I think it's about 90 minutes. It's downloadable from Gumroad. So the jkdrebel.gumroad.com/L/XZALL. I'm having trouble being able to put that up on the screen other than this screenshot, right? And so I'll get my tech guy, that's me, to take a look at being able to do that differently. So jkdrebel.gumroad.com/L/XZALL, something like that. I'll see if I can get a different label for that. All right, so that's it. Nothing else. Happy New Year, guys. Right? This is Dwight Woods, the JKD Rebel, signing off. I'll see you in 2024. Take care.